Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us on our supposed to be Tuesday's snack chat and stay on track. My name is Catherine, and I am here with the wonderful Shannon. And today we are covering types of adoption. And so for this, we're going to be talking about different types of adoption. So public, international, private adoptions. We're going to touch on fostered to adopt, kinship care, customary care, moral adoptions, basically any questions that you might have about the different avenues, I guess, for you to develop or grow your family. So we had a few questions come in, which we're absolutely going to get to and make sure that we're answering, but we know that some of you are seeing this live. So if you are seeing this, please feel free to post in the live feed below, questions, comments. If you have any answers or experience that you want to share, we absolutely want to hear from you. And Shannon also posted, I believe, in our private group. So we also know that some of you who might be beginning their journeys, it isn't something that you necessarily are sharing, or there may be questions you're not comfortable asking in a public forum. So if you scroll into our private groups are beginning the journey, waiting for our children and raising our children. So if you search for Shannon's post there, she had a beautiful little picture. Feel free to post it below and we will ask them anonymously on your behalf. So for those of you who are joining our live page right now, please know that what you are sharing and writing is publicly accessible. So we ask for you guys just to be mindful of names that you might be using, maybe specific situations that could share more details about a child or family member in your home. And obviously, we're going to remain respectful. And this topic can be a little bit controversial. The right word? We're going to go with that one because people have different thoughts and feelings about the different types of adoptions, and everyone's choice to pursue a specific type of adoption, kin, or customary care is their own journey. So before we answer these questions, I just want to let you know that your choice within the adoption community and why you're choosing adoption and the type of adoption is personal, and we respect any journey that you're going down. So when we are asking our questions, let's just be mindful that everyone has different paths to go down. Okay, there's my spiel.
Amazing.
Thanks. Did you want to shoot off the first question and we can start?
I sure will. I just went into both of the 3 private groups and popped that post back up top. So if people are in there now, I will be monitoring. So if I have shifty eyes, it's because that's what I'm trying to do, monitor all of our community options.
Not Candy Crush? No.
Wait a minute. I forgot about Candy Crush.
What? It's coming. There's a comeback for it, I think. And we do apologize, guys. We know that these are Tuesdays. We are continuing to do these on Tuesdays. It's just, I don't know what happened. There was some crazy tech issue that we weren't having access. So these will continue on Tuesdays moving forward.
But it looks good. We have a whole bunch of people on live with us now. So thanks for hanging out with us regardless the day that we show up.
Exactly.
So we'll get started with, can you explain a little about each process and the pros and cons of each? Way to go. Nice and easy.
There we go. Oh, it's a good introductory question as well. So obviously, if we're looking into, feel free to chime in on this too, Shannon, if you have things to say. So private adoption, international, and public adoption. So I'm not necessarily speaking of kinship and customary care because those do have a little bit of a different process. But for those 3 types of adoptions, everyone has to complete a home study and pride training. So it doesn't matter what avenue you're pursuing, you need to have it done. You can pursue it privately and out of pocket. If you're doing a public adoption through the Children's Aid, then obviously you have the option to have that done through your local Children's Aid Society. And so what basically happens, maybe I'll start with private. So I did my home study in pride privately. So we paid for a practitioner, and we did that because we didn't actually know what avenue of adoption we wanted to choose. So you complete it, and then in private adoption, then you would then register with a private adoption practitioner or agency. You would create a profile about who you are as a person or as a family unit, and your family, depending on the criteria of who you are and the type of child you're looking to adopt or the type of baby, a birth family would then review your life books or review your books, and then potentially ask to meet you and then select you as a potential match. In private adoption, sometimes you are in the room when a child is born, whatever it is, the decision that you guys make. Sometimes children are born and then a placement plan is made as well. So it doesn't mean private adoption means you're matched with a pregnant mother. Sometimes it's after a fact that an adoption plan is made. Once the child comes home, there is a 21-day period where a birth family can change their mind, can choose to parent their child. And so that is one of the scarier, I want to say, parts through private adoption is potentially you will have a child home and then they may or may not return to their birth home. I find as well that making sure that the agency that you're working with is providing the right amount of supports and counseling for your birth family is a huge factor in that as well. So when you are looking into private agencies or practitioners, you can always use our private Facebook groups as well to get recommendations of who others have used, good, bad experiences. You want to make sure that you do your research, that you're knowing things are done ethically. So that's the one piece I'm trying not to talk too much. So that's private. Publicly, you complete your home study and prior training through your local children's aid, and depending on the type of supports that you have available to yourself, who you are as a person, you can be matched with your local children's aid. There's also the ability to go to the Adoption Resource Exchange, and that's where all of the children's aid across Ontario come through a big conference, and you get to see the types of children who are waiting for their forever homes kind of at once. The very overall experiencing. A lot of people feel a lot of mixed emotions, and we do ARA preps as well. International adoptions. Again, you would go through an international agency. You would create a dossier. Is it?
Dossier, I would say.
Tomato on this thing. So you would need to have a dossier completed for a specific country. So each country has their own specific qualifications. So not only are you needing to follow the rules and regulations of Ontario, but there's also specific ones for the country of your choosing. So make sure you understand what specific qualifications that they are looking for in order to adopt there. Again, you'd be going to the country of origin, and it would be either 1 or 2 visits. Sometimes it's long periods of time, sometimes it's 2 shorter visits. And then you would be matched with a specific child. That's when you kind of get the call or you get the email saying that you've been matched. You'd submit your dossier, and then you'd have to wait for the country of origin's paperwork to be done. You'd do your visits, child would move home, and then you'd have to go through the immigration process here in Ontario. That was long. I'm sorry. But that's
I think it was great though. It was thorough. 2 questions in my mind popped up that I know our community are going to filter back to us. So I just want to ask, can we talk briefly on what Pride is? Because if they're really at the beginning of this, they might not know what that is.
Yes, I take that for granted. So the Pride training is a 28-hour training program that all potential adoptive parents need to take. You have homework, you learn more about children, about trauma, about loss, about developmental trauma, about your role, about community supports, and really it's the core foundations of what you might expect or what you might see with raising a child through adoption. And then the home study process, again, is when you're meeting with a social worker or an adoption practitioner, and they're asking you a ton of questions that you're going to feel very vulnerable and wondering if they can actually ask you all of that, but they have to go through it all to approve you. And once you have both considered and you are approved for home study, you do successfully complete your Pride, then you would be considered and awaiting an adopt ready family.
Amazing. The other thing that popped to my mind that I often already get questions about is, when is the next ARE?
Yeah.
We have one coming up on June 6th.
Yes. So typically they're April and November, but I think they moved the April, you're right, to June 6th.
But I believe there's one that's more specifically in the West that is in April.
Yeah, so they do mini ARE. So they have the province-wide AREs, which is twice a year, and typically that's done in the GTA in Toronto, and that's April and November, but now I guess it's more June, so they happen twice a year. But then there's also mini AREs, so like there's the Central West, there's the Peel, there's the Eastern mini ARE, so you always want to keep your eyes out, because those are children who are waiting locally, but not necessarily within your specific children's aid. So kind of all the West, London and Windsor, they kind of get together and do their own little piece. So make sure that you're connecting with your social worker. The Adoption Council of Ontario also puts them on their events. And as we know, we post as well. So just keep your eyes peeled. You can find out when they are.
Awesome. All right, so we'll move on to our next question, and it starts off with, this is a more personal question. Mm-hmm. Why did you guys decide the adoption route that you did? Oh, that's a good one. That is a good one.
Do you want to go first with this?
I sure will. So in total transparency, I never, ever, ever meant to adopt or imagined becoming an adoptive parent. Years ago, about 14 years ago, we got into fostering, which we'll talk a little bit about later. And we were not a foster to adopt family, but given the way the laws were back then, there needed to be a permanency plan in place. And when it became apparent that one of the children in our home would not be going back to biological family, I couldn't imagine him being anywhere else. So we quickly stepped up and put forth our interest, I suppose. That's a nice way to say it. And it still took a long time. It was still another additional 3 years from that point before he became an adoptive, or the adoption was finalized. And in most cases, he's our son. So yeah, there was no decision there. It was kind of like, oh, now what? So yeah, that was our story.
Okay, Cole's notes of my story. So we went into adoption after infertility and multiple losses. So when we went into adoption, we wanted a newborn, healthy infant. So that's why we chose to do our Pride in Our Home study privately, because we wanted to pursue private adoption. Going through Pride and learning more about the different needs of children, we realized that we had the capacity to support a child who might have more special needs, and that it didn't have to be a baby. So I did research, and if I'm being very honest, the cost of private adoption was a huge hindrance for us. So we decided to pursue public adoption, and we wanted a healthy younger child, and saw a profile, a little girl who did not match what we wanted, but was exactly what we needed. And off we went. And we weren't necessarily, we were interested. So our older two came home, and then about 2 years later, we told our worker that we would be interested in another adoption, but we weren't sure. We're still deciding. And then we got a call about our youngest. So she was a little bit of a surprise, and she came home as a healthy newborn infant through our local children's aid, through foster to adopt. So all three of our kids were foster to adopt.
Yeah. I don't even tell. I have like this stupid smile. I loved what you said there about wasn't necessarily what we wanted, but exactly what we needed. Totally. I'm like just beaming. Like I had no idea getting into fostering would lead us to have the family that we have today. So
right. And I didn't even want kids at first. And I think it was until I found out that I couldn't have kids, and I was like, excuse me,
what?
No.
Well, and I'm totally transparent. Like everyone that I meet through this role knows my story, and I gave birth at 17 and became a mom, and then that just makes your whole world be like, oh my goodness. So in my mind, it was just it, right? And fostering was just a way to offer our home and our hearts and our knowledge. So we didn't anticipate growing our family. So our one son's 24, and our youngest is 13. So it's kind of like starting right fresh all over again. Here we go. So our next question says, I've heard all kids adopted from foster care have special needs. Is this true?
That's a good question. And I think if we're thinking of the term special needs, I think any child who has ever been in this adoption community or journey or whatever you want, consolation, whatever you call it, is considered special needs, because the trauma and loss and grief of adoption is a special consideration. Children who we were present for my youngest's birth, she has experienced trauma, loss, and grief from adoption. Even though we have been with her, we named her day one. There is grief. Is that a special need? Absolutely. Absolutely. Do we parent her different than we would a biological child? Absolutely. Do all children in foster care have a medical diagnosis? No. So I think it depends on how you define what special needs. And do I say all children from adoption have a special need? Yes, I do.
I think it's a strong question. I think there's a lot of people that get into it and start hearing a lot of quote unquote horror stories because we have this different reality than perhaps we thought of when we started our parenting journey. So it can be off-putting, but I also think that there's still so many children that come into care or that are adopted privately or internationally who may not have a quote unquote special needs, but I think you're bang on with the whole trauma and loss. And it may be a great time that I'll plug Pathways to Permanency, because I really, really think that we didn't take the course until our son was 12. So long time into our adoption journey, and absolutely realized that the education we got from that course should have happened at the very beginning of our adoption journey. So you had a great answer. So we'll go to, we are approved privately to adopt a newborn infant. As time has passed and I've learned more about adoption, I think I'm comfortable with adopting an older child. Do I have to redo my home study? And what should my first steps be? Sorry if I should have broke that up a bit.
So I'm assuming that you're an awaiting parent with a private agency or practitioner, and for an older child, typically that I'm going to make the assumption that means through your local children's aid. So to switch from private to public, you don't actually need to redo your home study and your PRIDE training. What you do need to do is call their intake line of your local CAS. First, get an understanding of the types of children. So sometimes the type of child that you're able to support, that you feel comfortable with raising, might not be the type of children that they have in care at the moment. So before you kind of put your eggs in that one basket, have the conversation about the types of children who are currently in care and who you are. Once that conversation is had, all they need to do is actually just take your current home study and update it on their end. And once it's updated, you'd be considered an awaiting parent for a public adoption for older children. Another avenue that you can go through as well is through the Wendy's Wonderful Kids program. So without necessarily updating your home study, as a awaiting private parent, you can actually contact Wendy's Wonderful Kids, and they primarily support children with more special needs or complex needs, older children, and larger sibling groups. So if that is something that you might be interested in, we can help you connect with who your local Wendy's Wonderful Kids recruiter is. Just to let you know, for those who are going from private to public and just updating your home study, you have to be approved on their end. Although the thick of your home study is done and they just have to kind of revise it, that can still take a few months. So just be aware that if you're going in, it's not like a couple weeks you're in. I think for us, it took them like 3 or 4 months before they actually had us approved on their end. And then we started looking at potential matches and placements.
That's amazing news. Not amazing news, it's amazing information. Because I'm sure, no, it really is, because it's stuff that I don't even think I would have that knowledge of. So it's great that we can offer the community those answers.
Yeah.
One, which I think this is going to be a huge varied question, but what are the actual costs associated to adopting?
Well, I did some research because every couple of years they change. And so when I was adopting, it was a bit different. So the latest research that I did as of this week hasn't changed. Public adopting from foster care is free. There's no cost for you to be home study and PRIDE approved. There's no cost for the matching, for the lawyer fees, the social work fees. It's all free. Private adoption, from my research, it says currently in Ontario, it's anywhere between, it's a big range, $10,000 to $20,000. And that includes, again, lawyers, social work fees, agency fees, counseling for birth families, counseling for yourself. International adoptions is a wide range as well, and it's anywhere between $30,000 to $50,000. And I just want to be very clear that when we talk about fees for adoption, we are not buying children. I think that is a very hurtful common misconception. You're not paying for the child to be in your home. You are paying for the legal fees, for court time, for social work writing time, for counseling for yourself. You are paying for the process of adopting, not for the child itself, regardless of if it's international. And if you feel that any agency that you're working with, you are not comfortable with their pricing, you have a right to ask for a breakdown of what that pricing is. And if you feel at any step something might not be ethical, please pause. And a big thing that we actually get from a lot of awaiting families who are waiting for a private adoption, this is going on a bit of a tangent, but if you're on, say, Canada Adopts website, or you're on Instagram, so people have Facebook profiles, and you are approached by a potential birth parent, they cannot legally ask you for money in Ontario. You cannot pay for someone for their child. And if someone is asking you for money, that's a huge red flag as well. And you want to make sure that you're going through the right channels. So just wanted to kind of put that out there because I think it's important to talk about. But there are lots of fundraising that people can do and charitable organizations that can help support you in paying for the costs as well.
And I think it's a sad reality that there had to be that caveat there, but you know, we mention things because we have experience with our families hearing these things. So yeah. I think and I know for a fact there's some people at the very beginning of their journey tuning in with us today. And I think that that's a good piece of armor to have moving forward, because often people who mean well say things because they're not educated, and it can hurt. So that's a whole nother snack and chat.
It's true though. And I think that especially because you're in it with your heart and your head, hearing stories or getting pictures or understanding things and you know, maybe reading profiles of other families and success stories, your heart can cloud your head. And so just make sure that even in public adoption, just make sure that you are doing your due diligence. And if you're not comfortable with any amounts or pricing, or you want a breakdown, it's within your legal rights to ask for
absolutely
cover.
And if I think it's following your intuition. If something isn't sitting right, then it's okay to ask questions. And again, I think we spoke about it before when we talked about, I think it was the adoption breakdown piece. We talked about not allowing the fear to prevent you from asking those questions, because your heart and your head are so invested in it that it may think like, well, if I say something or if I ask, they won't work with me or they won't match me. But it's definitely better than not asking.
Yeah, and we can help you with the wording too. So if you feel like you're in that situation, you need a little bit of support about how best to approach it, feel free to reach out to your regional parent liaison or to any of us at Adopt for Life, and we can help support you through that as well.
Absolutely. And if you're watching, because this is on our live page and a lot of people aren't registered with our community, you can just go to www.adoptforlife.com/join our community. And then you'll meet the lovely Catherine. We'll hook you up.
I'm everywhere.
She really is everywhere. So what are the wait times like to adopt internationally, privately, and publicly?
It's another question we get a lot. There are no designated wait times. There is no, within 3 years, you're going to get at the top of the list. There is no wait list. What they do is they are looking for families for children, not children for families. So who you are as a person, your qualifications, your abilities, your physical house, your access to community service. I mean, there's so many, who you are as a person, your relationships. There's so many different kind of factors they look at when matching through all types, through international, private, and public adoption. So what's the general wait time? There is no general wait time. It can happen within, we actually had, was it like 2 weeks ago, a family literally just signed their home study and they got a call literally the next day or that day or something. And they just signed off. We have family who's been waiting for 5, 6+ years. It depends on the type of child you feel that you can raise. It depends on the resources of your local agency. Sometimes children just aren't available. Yeah, I wish I could say within a year you'll get it, but we don't know. The best thing that you can do while you're in that wait, however, is to try and educate yourself on key issues that affect children. So if you're saying that you're FASD knowledgeable, you have gone to training and webinars on developmental trauma, you understand what reactive attachment disorders are, these things that are affecting our children in our community. Updating your social worker that you are becoming more competent in this area is absolutely will help you find the right match as well.
And I think it's really key too to stay plugged into, or stay plugged into our community, because I think that a lot of people travel this siloed road and think that they're alone and they're not sharing potentially with friends and family. Maybe it's a private thing until they get a match. And that the different stages, how you feel in the beginning stage when you're just getting ready, it's very different from how you'll feel in that waiting for the phone to ring stage, and very different from the once you're matched stage. And the way we've structured our supports is so that there's specific people in that beginning group, and you're all in there together with your peers, right? So even within the groups, I think people are often sometimes afraid to step out, thinking that their emotions are very singular. And I think I'm not there, but I'm assuming that it's an en masse thing. Like if you're feeling something, chances are your counterparts, or at least a big enough handful, are feeling the same thing. So use those supports and use the community to protect your heart a little bit, I think. So the next question is, can we talk about the foster to adopt process?
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can.
So we both kind of did foster adopt. You actually did foster then adopt.
Yeah.
We did foster.
Surprise.
Fostered then stayed. So with us, we became adopt ready. We did not become foster approved. We wanted to formally adopt. We were then approached by, once we were kind of starting the matching stages, we realized that our oldest daughter was still in court process. So there was still a lot of stuff going on there. So they asked us if we would be open to foster to adopt. So you do need to be dually approved. So you need to be approved as an adoptive family and as a foster family. To be dually approved wasn't that big of a deal, at least in my end. I'm sure it was for the social workers end. Filled out a couple of forms, that type of stuff, got a foster to adopt. With foster to adopt, our kids came home sooner than when they would have on just adopt through just the adoption stream. But we were considered foster parents. So we had to get every time there was that medical checkup, we had to get medical forms signed. We had to do daily food logs. We had to do birth family visits. We couldn't get the kids' haircut without pre-approval. We couldn't leave our city without pre-approval. We couldn't have our daughter in a bassinet. Like there's every region is different. So please don't say this is the blanket foster family. But you also get support through the Foster Parent Association of Ontario, FPSO. I think that's the acronym. So absolutely, your job as a foster parent is to raise the child, love the child, and help with reunification. So in the foster to adopt program, the pros sort of say is that children typically come into your home younger, and they come into your home faster. But your job, your role within that child's life is not to be mom and dad. Your role is to care and love and allow that child to thrive as their first family hopefully is able to gain custody again. If that doesn't happen, then that's when you'd be able to flip into an adoption home. So in our case, our older two, actually all three of our kids were foster to adopt. So our daughter was placed when she was 3.5. She wasn't formally adopted until after 6. Our son was placed at 15 months. We adopted him at 3. And our youngest was adopted the day she was born, and she was adopted at when she was 1, like on her 12th month. there's absolutely pros and cons to this. And for myself, I didn't really want to get into a fostering because I didn't think my heart could handle any more loss, because I had so much loss in my life previously. But then I realized that fostering and adoption wasn't about me. And so it's a risk. You need to make sure that you have support and that you have gone through your own grief and counseling. And but yeah, it isn't an option. Not every children's aid does this. So if this is something you're considering, before you even start the conversations about if this is something for you, just make sure that it's something that your children's aid offers, because not all of them do as well. Did you have anything else, Shannon, other than?
I don't know if it's insightful.
Let's talk anyway. Either was mine. That's fine.
We again didn't start fostering with ever the intention of adopting. We had 2 children in our home, and again, we thought we were just helping and giving a safe space, right? And I absolutely did not have my head aligned with my heart when we agreed that, yeah, absolutely, if he's not transitioning back to his biological home and he's staying with us, I jumped into it without protecting either head or heart. So I would advocate so highly for therapy for yourself, therapy for the other children in the home, couples therapy, like everything, because when I look back and think of not just what the children went through, but what my own head and heart and space went through in the 1.5 to 2 years before we even got to adoption probation, like it was horrifying, because in my head it was, okay, great, we're stepping up, he's ours and we're going to move forward with this. But that's just not how the system works. We continued with visits. We had to continue with asking permission for every single tiny thing. And again, not every agency is going to be like that, but my head had transitioned to being his mother, or my heart had, and everything else had to catch up and had to wait, and the waiting was excruciating. But I think I just didn't have the education then. I didn't have the knowledge. I didn't know what to ask the social workers at the CAS. I didn't know what to look for in a way to protect even my birth children in the home. I didn't know how to help them through everything. So looking back now, I think, oh my Lord, I was a hot mess. And I absolutely advocate for everyone now is to just make sure that you're protecting yourself. And it sounds, and I push for that pretty much in every topic we talk about, I think, is pushing for protecting yourself, because we think it's selfish, and it really, really isn't. It's making it so that we're stronger for the children that are with us. So it just be prepared that, I think, and I'm not saying there's more risk to foster to adopt than there is with any other option, because there's the 21-day waiting period. There's all sorts of other heartbreak that can come along. But I think in that one, in the foster to adopt role, you could be put in different situations where you're working much more closely with birth family than perhaps a different avenue. And especially with the landscape of the current child welfare system, that's always focus forward, the first focus. So you have to keep that front and center in your mind, and again, just protect yourself, and that will help you support your children. So we have about 10 minutes left, and the next question is potentially not a 10-minute question. Okay. I'm going to put the Jeopardy music on for you. I've heard the word customary care, but I have no idea what it means. Can you talk more about it?
Yes. So customary care is a newer word that in the last couple of years that have come up. So Shannon, I'm going to do my best of what I know, so feel free to jump in as well. Yep. So customary care is a term that is used within Indigenous, First Nation, Métis cultures, tribes. And so without getting into too much background, there is a reason why First Nations, Métis, Inuit families and the child welfare system is trying to help support and protect that culture. I do know, we can have a whole conversation about why that needs to happen and about the disproportionate amount of Black and Indigenous children in care, but we'll leave that. We will come back to that. However, customary care is a specific contract made for Indigenous families who are raising Indigenous children. Sometimes Non-Indigenous families can be considered a customary care home or through a customary care agreement if they have specific ties to a tribe or if they're raising other children who may be in a specific culture. So it is not a formal adoption process. So customary care is a legal document that's done between the children's aid, the family, as well as the child's tribe to talk about how that child will be raised together. And so this is done again to help protect cultures and backgrounds of children and to ensure that children are being raised within their culture and that they are being raised surrounded by a community of their tribe or of their culture. So a lot of times a customary care agreement will be done saying that, yes, this family is going to raise this child as, you know, with my children, their background is Munsee, Delaware, and Ojibwe. So they would be raising children, their tribe, and they'll be raising them to be connected within the community. The types of supports that are available for customary care families are very different. For those who have formal adoptions, just like with kinship families, it's very disproportionate the amount of supports and services that are available, but it's really done to protect the child's culture in their background. Is that fair? I'm trying.
No,
that's the gist of it.
I think and again, I don't have an abundance amount of knowledge, and we absolutely have people within our organization who are far more well versed than you or I, but I think you did a really good job with answering the question, basically.
Yeah.
One piece that we didn't talk about with the types of adoption, because we were focusing on adoption, but we have a couple of minutes. So another thing I think that we can mention is that we do, with Adopt for Life, support families that are in commitments.
Yes.
And I think that that's an important piece that often people think that they're excluded from the supports or from having a parent liaison or from advocacy pieces that Adopt for Life and our parent liaisons can offer because they're in a kinship situation. So
yeah, absolutely. We provide that support, whether you're a grandparent or an aunt, or there's a new type of kinship, and maybe someone live will know, or maybe Shannon, you know it, but it's a new term for kinship that is used for families raising children that they know they have a previous relationship, but they aren't biologically related. Kith, is that the word?
I heard it just a couple of weeks ago.
I heard it too, and there's a new term, and I'm like,
yeah, it's not coming to me, but I did hear it a couple of weeks ago because I was like, oh, what is this?
We'll research it and we'll post it in the comments. And interesting enough, in a couple of weeks, we're actually going to be interviewing an author who wrote a book on kinship, a children's book on kinship. And I met with her a couple of weeks ago, and she told me in the United States, their welfare system is actually changing, almost morphing the kinship name. So they actually call grandparents who are raising their children specifically grandfamilies. And then kinship families are for family members who are raising children who aren't grandparents. So the book that we'll be talking about is A Grand Family for Sullivan. And so this is a children's book that this author and psychologist wrote. But it was really interesting to me to see the shift in that they're using specifically grand families because they feel that grandparents raising children have a unique set of circumstances above and beyond other kinship placements.
That's so true. So, I'm really excited to be in. I know you've already met her, but I'm excited for that one.
It's really interesting. And I think that, again, this is a whole different snack and chat, but just being aware that kin families, the lack of supports for kin families is not even a Canada-wide issue. This is a global world issue, and a lot of times kin families are not even a formal process. So Absolutely. In a lot of cultures, it's just grandma takes him, auntie takes him or her, and we move back. And I know that we need to do better within. This is part of what the next or upcoming snack and chat is going to be about as well.
That's amazing. So we won't dive too much into that.
No, but I'm trying not to. I get too excited.
Anybody that's watching now, and if you know a family that is a kinship family, absolutely let them know that we're able to support them. I have met so many families in the year that I've been with Adopt for Life, and they were like, I didn't know you could help us. Right. So especially again with the shift in the child welfare sector, I don't even know how to refer to it, but when the focus is about remaining within kin right now, that we are able to offer supports that the government's not doing, and that's a touchy subject, so we'll leave it there.
We'll leave it there.
Anybody that could use our supports, have them come and find Catherine.
Yeah, and even if it's not a formal process, again, we kind of touched about moral adoptions and you know, if you're caring for someone, or if you have cared, or if you have a heart child that you're raising and you're a part of their life, absolutely come and connect with us, and we're going to do our best to help support no matter where you are within this adoption constellation. Couple minutes left. I do want to talk about next week's Snack and Chat. So I just took a peek. Next week's Snack and Chat, we are talking about it's actually a really big subject as well, older child identity. And so we're going to have a guest, Angela Harvey, and she is a counselor in the field, and she helps youth who are older, who are adopted, who are going through the motions of identity, who they are from their past traumas, and trying to identify with themselves as an adoptee and within their adoptive home. So a lot of times when children, I think you're probably getting to the thick of things because you have a teenager now. So I'm not, because my kids are young, but trying to just coming to terms.
Thanks for the reminder.
I hear stories from other teenage families who are raising teens, and I'm like, is this what I look forward to? But
and you know what, I think it really started probably about 12 and a half. The questions really started coming fast and furious, and we were like, because I've been transparent, Forrester lives with FASD, so often we're like in the 5-year-old state. So when these like hard and heavy questions were coming, we were not prepared. We're like, okay, we're there now. So it's coming.
Yay. And I think it's something important that we need to talk about, and especially for people who have adopted children younger, like myself, it doesn't mean those questions and those identity and those issues are going to come up. And absolutely, identity is a huge part of every child's development, doesn't matter adopted or not. But if you're adding in the extra layer of identity and potential cultural backgrounds, or who am I and how do I identify myself, it's just such a big topic that a lot of families go through. So we're just really excited to have Angela coming and discussing. So if you have any questions about older child identity and adoption, start bringing them over to us, and we'll start compiling a list for you guys. So
amazing,
exciting.
Well, as always, if we missed any of your questions, we do go back through the thread, so through the posts within our private groups and through the live chat, and we'll make sure to answer them. So if we didn't get to them, we are not going to leave you hanging. Don't worry about that. And I think that's the top of the hour. We got them all in today.
And on time, so good for us. So we will see you guys next Tuesday. Facebook better be working with us again. Next Tuesday, we're talking about older childhood identity, and I'm really looking forward to it. I think it's going to be a really great session. And if you guys ever have questions or suggestions about upcoming Snack and Chats, we are always open. We run these from you as a result of feedback from the community. So please reach out to us if there's a topic you want us to cover, and we will absolutely put that into our roster. Awesome, Shannon. You're amazing. Thanks. Thank you so much.
See everybody later.
Bye.
Bye-bye.